Hello, adventurers! My name is Chance. Welcome to my spellbook, and thank you for taking a look at the first subrace of the dwarves. Today we're going to be looking at the Grey Dwarf, also known as a Duragar, which is how I'm pretty sure it's pronounced. I think it has two different pronunciations, but Duragar is by far the most popular in terms of what I've encountered. Although, to be fair, it's a fantasy world with fantasy names and fantasy races. So, pronounce it at your leisure, but if you don't want to be made fun of by your friends, Duragar is that's the most common way I've seen it pronounced. They were added with the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and they are a fan favorite for a lot of munchkins or power gamers in general, and you'll see why in a little bit. And we'll talk about them and their potential origin stories at length a little bit later on. But in terms of the formatting of these subraces, I kind of want to keep it more on the mechanical side of things, as that's what this channel's kind of built around. However, there are tons and tons of other content creators that deal with the deep lore behind these guys, as well as literal volumes of books that have been written about the dwarves in general. So that's probably not the information I'm going to go over in this, although I will touch on it. We're just going to be focusing on mechanics for the most part, just so you know how to play them and what their abilities do. Now, without further ado, let's take a moment here and look at their traits. They gain a +1 to strength off the bat, and that is, of course, in addition to the +2 to constitution that you get just for being a dwarf. And you get superior dark vision, which adds another 60 feet onto your already 60-foot dark vision, totaling up to 120 feet of vision, which is certainly very impressive. Although you still cannot see through magical darkness, only the Devil's Sight and a couple magical items will do that for you, so do bear that in mind. However, most non-magical darkness will not be an issue to you. Under extra languages, you can speak, read, and write Undercommon, which might be super useful based on the campaign world you're in. But if you thought that was all, and to be fair, that's pretty good in terms of what just a subrace will offer. However, the Duragar got a lot more going on than that. Let's check out their other traits. So the first one we're going to go over is Durgar Resilience, and this is pretty dang cool. So you have advantage on saving throws against illusions, and against being charmed or paralyzed, which is pretty impressive. There is kind of a dark reason behind this that we'll go over in a little bit, but mechanically I'm sure you can certainly see the benefit in this, especially during those early levels where you don't really have the highest proficiency bonus, and where a lot of the enemies you're going to be going up against are likely going to be taking advantage of these conditions and spells in particular. It might also be worth noting that we do have an illusions playlist, so if you want to check out all the illusion spells, you can check them out there. But there's a lot of them, including ones that will change appearances, so there's a good chance that your DM is going to have they're going to run up into some higher difficulty when it comes to using some of their more commonly accessible tools. So it's kind of good. Once again, munchkins and power gamers really like the Duragar. They also have Durgar Magic, so at 3rd level you can cast Enlarge/Reduce spell on yourself once using the Enlarge option, and we go over that in another video. So just search for Enlarge/Reduce 5e and it'll come up, or look on the channel, it'll come up. Basically lets you increase your size and deal a little bit more damage as well, which is certainly nice. At 5th level, you can cast invisibility on yourself once with this trait. You don't need material components, and you can't cast them while you're in direct sunlight. That's kind of a theme for these guys, and I'll get into why that is in a little bit. Although sunlight has no effect on them once they are cast, you regain the ability after a long rest, and intelligence is your spellcasting ability. Very cool stuff, and they have sunlight sensitivity, and this is by far the biggest drawback to them. You have disadvantage on attack rolls and on perception checks that rely on sight whenever sunlight is involved. So, by direct sunlight being involved, if it's shining on you, if it's shining in your peripheral, if it's shining on the creature itself, disadvantage. Sucks, but it's kind of the case. Although there are creative ways around this, the one I see most argued is just using sunglasses. You can have a side quest where you find a jeweler and you can get the special glass or sand or whatever he needs to make them. That is a thing, although if you're going that route as a DM, I would probably require attunement. Reason being, and I know I'll get a little bit of backlash for that, but the reason I'm saying that is the Durgar, there's a reason that they have this to kind of hold them back. And it's a balanced subrace, right? It's really, really good. You get a bonus to strength, which is almost always nice, especially if you're dealing with a martial class. And what's the biggest drawback to most martial classes, right? Well, it's usually that they're rather weak when it comes to various saves, especially against illusion magic, and they don't really have any spellcasting ability of their own. And the Durgar solves both of those problems, right? And it does it in rather creative ways. So that's why I think attunement for the goggles would work. I think better ways is just use magic. A low-level spell like Fog Cloud, for example, would work really nicely. Or, I mean, you might make it so it's kind of like a placebo thing almost, right? Like it's in your head. So if you use something like Suggestion, for example, and cast it on a fellow party member, or even on yourself if your DM will allow it, and just be like, the sunlight doesn't bother me. This like a mantra almost, and then you can kind of get over that hurdle. But that's kind of a world building thing, so that's all up to your dungeon master. Just run it past him. Fog Cloud, though, should work fine. The Tempest Cleric also has a pretty interesting way around it. There's ways to deal with it, but I just wanted to point out that there's a reason why it's there. So, or you could cop out entirely and just have someone cast Fairy Fire, and that would give you advantage, which would cancel out the disadvantage. So you could also do it like that, and in higher levels, you're almost always attacking with advantage for one reason or another anyways. So, yeah, and I think the way this subrace is meant to be played is more tactfully, right? Like you intentionally kind of convince people to come to dark alleys or things of that nature, or you lure them in, rather. But let me know how you would deal with it, or how you have dealt with it or dealt with it down beneath in the comment section. I'm always curious to see what you guys can come up with. And that's about it for their traits, actually. So let's get into my personal thoughts. So if you are unfamiliar with the story behind the Duragar, it's something to the effect of they were greedy dwarves who kind of went too deep, and then they got captured by, or they were influenced to dig deep in part by mind flayers, and they were captured and experimented on by them, hence their resilience. And they have a rather adversarial relationship with the drow, if memory serves. They were slaves at one point, and they kind of bitterly resent that. And because of that, they have rather almost pessimistic or nihilistic views, very contrary to the rest of their kin, at least as so far as to the kin that live up top, right? So they have a very different set of values. They're pragmatists and quite brutal, and not genuinely well liked across most worlds, although yours might be different. In terms of classes that work great with them, honestly, most martial classes are kind of what they're built for, right? In terms of which ones in particular, barbarians would probably be a good place to start. Outside of that, fighters are always a solid bet. Really anything to take advantage of that strength. And the resilience, of course, really helps out being a frontline fighter. Last thing you want is being charmed and then turning on the rest of your party, so advantage in that saving throw would really be good for you there. They're just overall pretty great. Yeah. Just don't expect to be well liked. Like, I wouldn't expect a Duragar Bard to be a very popular combo, although who knows, I might be surprised. In any case, let me know what you think of the Durgar down beneath in the comments section, and of course, mention any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, or stories of your own. That being said, I hope you have a wonderful day, and as always, happy adventuring.